So Russ isn't exactly cooking, huh?
He's doing whatever the opposite of cooking is. Now,
Getting cooked.
he's getting cooked. That's exactly what it is. He is cooked. He's as cooked as can be. So the Denver Broncos are playing a football game right now, and I can tell you from living in Denver, Colorado, or in the Denver vicinity, in the Front Range area. Let's just say I
Yeah.
live in Broncos country,
Yep.
and
Let's ride.
let's ride. That was the vibe. That's been the vibe the whole week. Russell Wilson is. There were some dim vibes last week, but I can tell you we were building up towards a positive performance tonight, and it has been anything but for Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. Same old Broncos.
Well, at least they can hang their hat that they're going up against the 85 Bears. Oh, no, wait. It's the 2023 Arizona Cardinals, who are definitely going to have the number one pick in the draft. Everyone, I mean, they're as bad as it gets. But Russ starts off. He goes a little bit, incomplete short left, incomplete short middle. And then he finally does get a short pass for completed. But that's it. He's going to finish the day 1-for-4 for that 19-yard completion. Got sacked, lost the ball. Their kicker, Brett Maher, missed a field goal. They're a disaster right now.
They are a pit of despair. And listen, I'll say this about training camp interceptions, which he has thrown several of. I'll say this about preseason games. They're meaningless unless they confirm our priors. In this case, it shows that Russell Wilson is washed. Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on x.com. Nope. No, wait. It's still twitter.com, but it's called X.
X.com reroutes there.
X.com reroutes there?
Yeah, didn't you hear he bought X.com in the 90s for $1 million?
Right.
And it's now goes to Twitter if you go there.
How could I forget? Well, find us on X.com. My handle is @RealBirdLawyer. But it directs there. Like if I type in x.com,
right.
It redirects
the
to
URL
twitter.com.
changes to Twitter. Yeah.
Just preposterous. I'm here with my co-host Taylor. He is on x/twitter.com @Taylor_Witt. What's going on, bud?
Now don't go to x/twitter.com. You will not have any success if you do that, or the other. Yes, we are in preseason action. It's not quite time, but it's almost time. You can smell it. Football's in the air. It's a good time right now, especially if you're a fan of the best team in the universe.
Speaking of football in the air, I have to update our riff because the game is ongoing and Russell Wilson is still in the game at the end of the first quarter, and he did complete a second pass. I mean, they're down extremely bad. Like the guy, they want something. He's in for a third drive because their first two drives they have one first down.
Bad. Yeah.
And they're like, Sean Payton's like, you got to stay out there until we put some points on the board. We need a win here in preseason game bad. 1, or we are totally cooked. And spoiler alert, they are totally cooked. Check out our sponsors, Underdog Fantasy. Use our promo code SUNNY, SUNNY, match your deposit up to your first $100. Speaking of fantasy, our leagues are locked and loaded. We can't wait to play fantasy with you guys. It is going to be so good. I mean, listen, there's a lot of listeners to this podcast that aren't in our fantasy leagues. So, on the one hand, I don't want to gush about it. Yeah. On the other hand, we came up with some really cool concepts for these leagues. We're pretty much going to revolutionize fantasy football, and our listeners are going to have an amazing time, and so are we.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really like to be able to be the decision maker on this stuff with you because we're the only ones who know how to run a successful fantasy league. Literally, correct. No one in the universe knows how to do it other than us. It's crazy. And the 27 people across the 3 leagues that are joining us are going to be the first people that get to just experience the awesomeness that is It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom fantasy football.
Experience us, celebrate us a little bit. That's going to be great. And speaking of celebrating, we got a great show for you guys today. We've got the news. We've got a game preview.
Woo!
Because the Chiefs are playing in a football game on Sunday. It is the preseason. We are not down bad, so we'll see how long our actual football players are out there. Probably not very long. They'll probably, get a touchdown on offense and get a 3-and-out on defense, and then all the starters will be gone. But it's against Jace Frost's Saints down in the Bayou, old Cajun Mike McCarthy's former team. That's Sean Payton, for those of you who aren't familiar with the fact that Sean Payton right. is Mike McCarthy. Yep. Look it up. It's science. We've got our ass blast from the past. Yeah, it was a true ass blast this week. The 12-2 Kansas City Chiefs taking on the 8-6 Minnesota Vikings. I'm not going to tell you how it turned out, but some asses got blasted. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to close it out with a mailbag question from our loyal Board of War OU Sass. But first, So Chiefs are wrapping up camp game this week. Andy Reid had his big kind of end of camp presser and a couple of interesting nuggets in there. So he did mention on giving Patrick Mahomes snaps in the preseason. He wants to get him in the flow. Pre-game, the whole thing there, having you go through warm-ups, your juices are going a little bit more than what they do in practice, just a gradual ramp up. No news there, really, except that, Andy Reid continues to believe in playing his starters and specifically his quarterback in the preseason. And we're talking about Russell Wilson, and it makes sense that Sean Payton wants to get him out there because, last year he didn't play in the preseason and he ended up being dog shit. And so, but Andy Reid runs obviously one of the most physical camps in the league, and he plays his guys in the preseason, and he's never going to change.
Yeah, he's doing it right because he's amazing. And if everyone else thinks that they have a better grip on being an NFL head coach than Andy Reid, they're wrong. And he's proven it. So, if he wants to go throw the guys out there, it's because that's the right thing to do. And, the fans have earned it. He said the players have earned it, which they absolutely have. But can you imagine watching your team play preseason football and never seeing any of your starters for the whole preseason? I'd flip.
I'd be agonized.
It'd be terrible. So we're excited about it. We get to go watch our defending Super Bowl champs go out there and put the hurt on somebody, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it'll be great. We'll talk about injuries when we get to the game preview, because now, again, we've transitioned into the next phase of football, which is not training camp. It's preseason games. I guess quick update on the Chris Jones situation. He's still not here.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have an update that I don't have?
No, I don't. I really don't. And I mentioned this yesterday on x.com/twitter.com. I'm just starting to get annoyed with everybody involved in this whole process because I feel like if the Chiefs have a number and they're not going to budge off it, Chris needs to realize that he needs to show up because he's under contract and he's costing himself $50,000 a day. And if you really if the Chiefs really are not going to budge and they're just going to play him out one more year and they're not going to extend him for the number that he wants, he just needs to show up and he needs to be present and he needs to go out and have a great year. Now, he did tweet yesterday. He gave in to the badgering fans. He's been Xing a lot. He gave in to the badgering fans and he relented and he said he would answer one question. And they asked him if he was going to get an extension. He said, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the X in front of me, but he said, I'm under contract for one more season. After that, who knows? Let's go out and get it. So, he is planning to play this year, and it sounds like he'll be there week one, which, we knew that the CBA essentially mandated that, but I guess it's still good to hear. It's a little bit reassuring because if it were me, it's not. It's Chris's bag, and he's got a much bigger bag than I do. But if it were me, I would have showed up and collected my $50,000 a day paycheck, or rather, I guess not my $50,000 a day fine, right? So
sure.
He's going to be there eventually. The question still remains whether he's going to have a new contract with the Chiefs or not. We don't know.
To give Chris and his circle, his agents and all that, the benefit of the doubt, which they deserve because he's an amazing player and he's a great dude. And he hasn't really, he's one of the most beloved Chiefs players of all time. Of ever. Yeah. He just is an absolute star. And if he thinks, or if they think, or a combination, that him sitting out these training camp days and taking a $50,000 a day hit, if they think that the long run number that they're going to get by showing that they're serious and by showing that it means a lot to them and that they are threatening to not play and all that stuff, maybe that money makes sense to them. Maybe they think that, all right, if we had just signed a deal for $27 million, we could get $32 million if we just kind of show them that we're freaking out. So you gotta figure that some calculated moves are being played here, and they're not just sitting there every day with their thumbs up their ass with not showing up and not doing anything, not negotiating. I just wish I knew how the negotiations, how much they've been in the room, what the standstill is actually at. Are we talking the Chiefs won't go higher than 29? Chris and his team says 31 minimum. Like where are the numbers? Because like you gotta get this shit done. You got to get it done for everyone involved.
You know, what struck me this week was just thinking about the Tyreek Hill situation, because
same.
The Chiefs knew in March when they traded Tyreek Hill that wasn't going to happen, that they weren't going to be able to pay him what he was asking.
Yep.
And they got him out of there and traded before the draft, and they got picks for that draft. And they had the entire offseason program to go through that. Now, that would suggest that if the Chiefs knew that they weren't going to pay Chris, and I guess if they wanted to trade Chris, there's always a possibility that they, kind of said, we want you to play one more season and then you can take a hike. But they haven't been saying that, and Chris hasn't been saying that. And I feel like if that were their position, we would know, because I think Chris and his team at this point would let us know. Obviously, they're not offering him what he wants, but like, it doesn't seem like they want him to play one more season and take a hike. So why this situation? That's what I don't understand. And I think like what's hard for me to comprehend is if there was a dialogue back in March, which there surely was. I mean, we know around the time of the draft when Brett Veach was interviewed that they'd been talking to Chris and everything like that. I mean, I just don't understand how you can let it get this deep into the preseason without something happening. It's just hard for me to understand.
It's an expensive game of chicken, and it's one that if both sides think that the other side's going to break, and we're going to save money if you're the Chiefs or get money if you're Chris Jones by forcing the other side to be the first ones to break, then you've got a positive dialogue in March. Both sides go, that guy, there's no way that guy's going to go through the end of the preseason taking $50,000 a day, or Chris Jones going, there's no way they're going to let me walk or let me get out of this building, because they know that I'm everything to the defense. We've talked about his impact a lot, and how, that when Tyreek Hill left, the offense still had Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Andy Reid. They still had three elite top level,
three Hall of
contributors to that side of the ball. Three Hall of Famers,
and
absolutely.
And
three goats. Three goats,
exactly.
Honestly. Literally all three of them.
Three guys on the Mount Rushmore of head coach, quarterback, and tight end.
Yes, exactly. So you've got them on offense, which means Tyreek, as great as he was, the Chiefs knew they could let him walk and be fine. Whereas I think both sides of this negotiation know that they absolutely cannot play defense without Chris Jones the way the roster is currently constructed. They just can't do it. They can't do it successfully. And that gives him a lot of power. That gives him a lot of leverage in this situation. And yeah, they could tag him next year, but the players have so much power these days and so much ability to just say, nah, I'm good. I've made a shitload of money. That shitload of money that you're offering me isn't as good as another team's shitload of money they're going to offer me. So like, it's a game of chicken. And
it's weird because the CBA has given them less power, but I feel like their social media game and their ability to just say, no, I want to play for somebody else, trade me, has become infinitely stronger than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
It's because they figured out that they could do it. Sure. It's like, it's not built into the rules of the league. They're just calling the bluff on players and on owners and teams and contracts. And they're just saying like, hey, I'm the one who plays the football. You guys don't play. And if I'm going to sit down, like, you don't get me. And I don't think I think also the fact that the contracts weren't as big as they are now, kind of, players were like, I don't know, so I'm going to sit out, but then I'm only going to be able to earn X amount. Now these guys are like, man, I can go sign for another $20-30 million or whatever. And it just kind of think it warps them a little bit, but it also gives them a lot of power. So players can do anything they want. Chris Jones is going to do what he thinks is right for him and his family and his last big bag that he's going to get as a football player before his knees collapse and his brain collapses and everything. I mean, like, life after football is not great. And I am all for him getting as much as he possibly can. I just want the Chiefs to do it. I just want the conversations to stop and the money to be signed. And hopefully by the time you all are listening to this, it's done. But we've said that for the last 4 freaking pods and it hasn't happened.
Let's talk about this Andy Reid presser again. He had a quote here that I thought was worth discussing, talking about the big cut, because this year, I mean, this is all the cuts that are going to be made until the day that everyone in the league cuts down to their roster. And there's going to be a jillion times more cuts this year because it used to be a tiered system. Now it's not. Now everybody just has to be roster compliant on the same day. Andy Reid was asked about that. Said, yeah, I think all coaches like that. I mean, I understand the other part of it. I think the coaches love that part, and you get an opportunity to coach the guys all the way through. And that last game, they get a lot of reps. Even when we were doing 4 games, he means preseason games, that last game, they got a ton of reps. I just think that's a positive thing for the guys to have an opportunity to make a living at this thing, shine. It's interesting because, I mean, I think my initial reaction when I heard that they were going to be doing this big cut as, not an NFL head coach was like, I mean, this kind of sucks. Like, these guys are all going to get cut down on the last day. All the teams have sort of finalized their rosters. Like, where are all these guys going to go? Whereas under the previous system, the tiered system, like, you cut a guy the first week of training camp, like, that guy's got 3 or 4 weeks to find another team, another roster. Now they don't. They've got basically a week before the season starts to go out and try and, glom onto a team that's already set its roster also. Like, I mean, there was still a big cut under the previous system. Like, the last cut down day was the biggest day. But I don't know. I mean, Andy and I are different schools of thought on this, and he's right and I'm wrong. But just curious what you think about this whole situation.
Yeah, I take the opposite approach, which is that those guys that are getting cut on the first time that you can possibly send a player off of your roster when you have 90 of them, those guys aren't catching on. Like, you're right that they could go try out at another team, but the chances that one team sends a guy away and then 3 weeks later in the preseason, another team's like, oh, why did they ever send you away? We definitely need you on our squad. Like, it just doesn't seem like a scenario that's super likely. So on the other hand, when you cut everybody at the end, what that also means is that you haven't cut anyone until the end, which means that all of these guys, I'm sure there are a lot of guys out there that have tried out for a team and the very first opportunity they got cut a week into a training camp or whatever, or into the preseason, and that was it. And then they didn't get that full experience of being an NFL player and those weeks of preseason training and hype for the game and all that stuff. Like, I bet those 3 preseason games before these guys get cut are thrilling for the guys that get cut, because, like, that's the dream. That's playing in the NFL. That's, going out there into Arrowhead Stadium and, imagine if you were a Chiefs player that got cut after the first game that was a road game. You never even got to play in Arrowhead. Like, it just... Right. So I do think that the late one cut is better for the guys that aren't very good, or at least, I mean, they're great because they're playing for an NFL team, but like the guys that aren't ever going to stick on a roster, because it's more exposure for them. It's more experience. Maybe one of the guys was feeling like shit one of the weeks or was just having a freak out moment because he's in the NFL finally or whatever, and like didn't have a great first game. Normally he would have got cut. Now he gets the chance to kind of get his feet under him, show off a little bit. I mean, that's what Andy was saying at the end of that quote, was like, gives them an opportunity to make a living at this thing and shine. Like, the more opportunities these guys get, the better. And so I actually like the final cut. And I think that the teams have a pretty good grip on their rosters. And so maybe, let's say the Chiefs were going to cut down to like 53, but like 50s 2 and 3, they didn't like very much. Like, they're still going to be able to look out for all the other guys that were just cut on all the other rosters and be like, okay, we had our eye on this guy. We had our eye on this guy. Let's bring them in. And like, they could still massage it a little bit that way if they want. So I like it.
I have an update on the Denver.
I've been watching. Buddy.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, let me just update our listeners who will be listening to this on Saturday, and they'll already They'll already know, but there's some of them that won't be checking in on the Broncos' first preseason game, like we do, because we have a real hater complex against the Denver Broncos. Russ finishes. I'm sure this will be his night. It would be insane if Sean Payton sent him out there again. No chance. He went 3 drives. The Broncos scored 0 points. He went 4 of 9 for 49 yards. That's an average of 5.4 yards per attempt. Not great.
No.
He took a sack.
He lost a fumble, or he recovered a fumble.
He recovered a fumble. He fumbled the ball.
He's still in on the 4th drive, by the way.
Oh my God. They are down. So on the 3rd drive, they missed another field goal. So Brett Maher, who, by the way, they were having a kicking competition, and everybody here in Denver was saying, like, oh, Brett Maher looks so much better. He's definitely going to make the team. Yikes.
Well, Maher missed the first one. Elliott Fry missed the second one.
Oh, my God. I didn't see that.
Both kickers in the kicker competition are not acquitting themselves very well at all.
He just completed a 19-yard pass to Cortland Sutton. Look, he's cooking.
It's all short.
Look, it's
short left.
It's his 4th drive against the worst team in the NFL. In the preseason in game 1.
His quarterback rating has spiked up to a sparkling 74.8. So,
4-yard pass to Adam Troutman. Boy, he's cooking with gas. Now, let's talk about a real preseason game here. And I'm talking about the Chiefs traveling to New Orleans to take on the New Orleans Saints. Jace Frost's new squad. Jamal Williams will be there eating funnel cakes on the sideline. It's going to be incredible.
I love that guy.
Yeah, he's great. I love him too. For those of you who don't get the reference, he called beignets funnel cakes. It made a lot of people really mad. We're going to issue our traditional game preview where we kind of talk about both sides of the ball and go through all of that stuff because it's preseason and the preseason doesn't matter. It doesn't count. The matchups don't matter. We don't care about any of that. We're not going to show anything interesting. We're not going to do anything interesting, but there are going to be some interesting players that are going to play in this game, including some guys that we're going to see on the field in preseason action for the first time. Andy says everybody will play. We already talked about it. He is old school. He will get people reps. I'm sure Mahomes will only pay Broncos incomplete pass on 3rd and 4. Let's see if they can make it a trifecta for missed field goals. This would be
even if they make one, dude. It's the late second quarter against the worst team in the NFL.
This would be a 38-yarder. So
they're trying to go up 3-0.
If they miss that, Russell Wilson should buy the kickers dinner because then they'll be the story instead of him.
Sure.
Yikes. Anyway, so turning back to the real preseason game here, Chiefs and Saints. So everybody's going to play. I'm sure Mahomes and the starting offense will probably go in, get their touchdown, and get out of the game. That's how it's been like the last couple of preseason game ones.
Sure.
The offense comes out. They look like nothing's ever changed, that they've never taken a day off. They score, and then they leave the game. But let's talk about who we're excited to see on offense, what we're looking for on offense. Let's each pick 3 things or 3 players. I'm going to give you first pick, and I got a feeling I know who you are.
Yeah, just like the 1-1 in any draft, which is always a slam dunk no-brainer. Russ touchdown to Jerry Jeudy. So
my God,
he's
they're
back.
going for it on 4th and 4,
and they did
on his 4th drive of the game in the first preseason game against the Cardinals. You are down.
They're down
extremely bad.
Yep, exactly right. So obviously, I think everyone at home at the same time is saying Justin Ross. He's the guy that is the camp darling. He's the guy that is absolutely. We want to see it. We want to see it work. We've been talking about him now for an off season and a half. I mean, or a year and a half, really. And he's going to get his looks. He's going to get his chance to at least go out there and make a play on an NFL DB the way that he has on Chiefs DBs in camp this year. And so that's fun. So I certainly, even if Justin Ross doesn't have a catch in this game, I just want to see him suit up and go out there with a helmet on as a Chief and show that it's real because it looks real to us so far. And so I'm very excited to see our guy, future Hall of Famer, number 1 in our hearts, Justin Ross.
I knew that's where you'd go, and that's a great choice. How could you go wrong with Justin Ross? I'm going to pick another wide receiver. I'm going to pick Rashee Rice. This is our first chance to see Rashee Rice out there. And, we're not big college football guys. So obviously we've watched Rashee Rice tape since he's been drafted. We've watched highlights. We've seen what he's doing in training camp. But I didn't watch Rashee Rice play football games at SMU. So this is my first chance to really see what Rashee Rice is about. It's our first chance to see him on an NFL field as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs, wearing the Chiefs uniform, going out there and playing. And one of the things that we didn't really talk about here, but like one of the things that's interesting too about the first preseason game is we have a depth chart, which we didn't even talk about because the first depth chart is meaningless. But what is meaningful is who starts and who is getting snaps when in the first preseason game. Mm-hmm. The guys that are the presumptive week 1 starters will get a drive, probably, and then they will be out of the game. So a guy like Justin Ross, a guy like Rashee Rice, how much they play on those first couple of drives of the game will be really interesting to me. And, aside from Marquez, or I always say this, Marquez.
No.
Valdez-Scantling.
Marquez.
I said Marquez.
Yeah, right. That was correct. People say Marquez.
I always say Marquez, and you correct. Damn it. No, okay, whatever. MVS. Let's move past it. Let's move past it. We know MVS will be out there on the first drive. But the other distribution of wide receivers, and especially since Kadarius Toney is not going to play in this game, the distribution of the wide receiver snaps for the rest of the team, how many wide receivers are on the field, who's getting the snaps, who's getting the looks, who has earned the quarterback's trust and is getting the targets, that will all be really interesting to me. Can't wait to see Rashee Rice and the other wide receivers out there.
I agree, and I also have to give my mea culpa. I had to check it out and look it up because I always feel like I get it right, and I felt like you always got it wrong. No, it's Marquez, not Marquez. So,
yeah, I always said Marquez.
Yes.
You must have. Yeah, I incepted you.
The wires got crossed in my brain. I thought that
you.
You did. You incepted me. I thought there's no way that you just got it right. So yes, Marquez. Anyway,
Marquez Valdez-Scantling. MVS. Give me your second guy or your second thing to watch for.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fun and interesting pieces on this team. I do think that as a guy that's so focused on Mahomes and the offense and all those guys, I'm not going to say Mahomes because that's too easy, but like, I want to see.
You could say Mahomes if you want.
Okay, I'm gonna say. I wanted to see the first team offense do well. That's like something that I am extremely.
Yeah, but you just want to see Mahomes out there.
I just want to watch my guy. I just want to watch Mahomes go out there and throw some balls around and throw dimes and be himself.
Fly around and make plays. So yes, I probably in my heart I could have picked him 1-1 there, but I'm going. I mean, listen, going back to back with Justin Ross and Patrick Mahomes is extremely on brand for you.
Cooked you in this draft
in that order. It's not a draft. Okay. If it was a draft, you would be cooking me, but it's just 3 selections for each of us in a row,
back and forth.
Right, back and forth. So this is going to be a little bit non-traditional. It's not going to be a player, but I'm going to go with Matt Nagy. I want to see Matt Nagy on the sidelines as the offensive coordinator again. And we talked about this a little bit when we were going through the quarterback documentary, the Netflix documentary, which if you guys haven't checked it out, please watch it. It's gotten sort of like mixed reviews, but I feel like the people that don't get it, I mean, they are Chiefs fans. Like if you're a Chiefs fan, you will love it.
Yeah.
You will think it's the greatest thing ever made because you get all these great, like I was listening today around the NFL, which I love. And, Greg Rosenthal, whom I love, was like, yeah, dude, we really need to see Pat Mahomes, going to the pumpkin patch with the kids. And I was like, you're goddamn right.
We did.
Yeah, we
absolutely
did. And it was
amazing.
When Brittany outshot him at the little little basketball hoop thing, that was hilarious.
Yes.
Talk shit. It was incredible. So watch that if you haven't yet. But in any case, Matt Nagy. Obviously, we're not going to see any razzle dazzle in the first preseason game, but I will be interested to see just how he looks on the sideline. Who's kind of doing what? Who's going to be the first guy talking to him after the first drive? Is it going to be Andy? Is it going to be Nagy? Going over to have that conversation with him on the bench. Is it going to be both of them? It might be both. But we'll be really interested to see kind of how he, just how he looks out there. I'm excited to see it. Did you see him, by the way? Did you see his throw the other day?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Not many OCs can do that. Yeah, I mean, Nags was an NFL quarterback. Like,
sure, he hit the crossbar from like 40 yards out. If you guys, if you guys want to check out this video, he's awesome.
He's cool, and he's fresh. He's a fresh idea in the room.
Yes, exactly.
Full of people that already, if his fresh ideas aren't good, they're going to go back to what they know works. So it's not like it's going to hurt anything, right? Like if Nagy
Bears fans are so butt mad about it.
The Bears didn't have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid.
Right.
That's what
they,
like
they had Mitch Trubisky and Allen Robinson. And
exactly right. So,
terrible.
So, yes, sometimes these pieces on the Chiefs, if they go to places that aren't the Chiefs, aren't going to look as good. Imagine that. Any of these guys. But, they're here, and they're all together, and the freaking Avengers are all on this team, and they're going to go save the world. So, just calm down about Matt Nagy as a Bear, all you Bears fans. That's a different lifetime ago. Anyways, my last pick of people I'm going to be excited about, since we went all offense for the first four.
Well, we're going to do defense separately. This is you got three offense. Yeah, you got three offense and three defense. Perfect. Pay attention to the showdown.
So I naturally went two offense.
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of where
I get it.
That's where I'm wired.
And I'm surprised that you didn't go for a third.
I was about to, but then I was like, I can't just go three offense. But okay, so Deneric Prince is a guy that is kind of this year's Isaiah Pacheco. And it doesn't mean that I think he's going to end up being the starting running back by the end of the year, because I do believe in Pacheco, but that same type of camp hype type of thing, late or undrafted. I mean, he was undrafted. Pacheco was a 7th rounder, so you don't invest a lot in him, but that they've got pop and they've got, some skill. And I'm excited to see if he gets enough reps to be featured, especially on a later drive, which I'm sure he will. He's a fun guy to watch for, and the running back room is fine. I still feel like it's sacrilege in Chiefs Kingdom to say that I'm not I don't want to bet the house on Isaiah Pacheco. And it doesn't mean that I don't think that he's a good running back. I enjoy him as a player, but
sure.
He plays so hard, and he got hurt so much last year and played through it and stuff. And that's because he was a young kid and strong and all that stuff. But he's a 7th round running back, from Rutgers. The pedigree there is just not someone that I feel all right, we could just plug Pacheco in every year for the next 6-7 years on the Chiefs offense and feel fine about it. He's not a 1A workhorse type of back yet. He might become that. Again, very big fan of the player, but I would like the Chiefs to have some more bullets in that gun in the running back room. I would like to have a little bit more of a plan in place in case he falls off a little bit in production, or in case he gets hurt, which certainly could happen given the way that he plays. So yes, Deneric Prince would be a guy that I would like to know what the Chiefs have in a backup running back, just in case he's needed, because he might be.
All right, my third pick for the offense. I'm going to go with the offensive line as a whole. I think this one it's going to be interesting, because you see one-on-ones at camp, and those really do not mean anything. I mean, the defense should win those most of the time, and you obviously you don't have the blocking schemes, you don't have the help from the other offensive linemen. I just want to see how these guys play individually, but especially how these guys play together. This is the center of the line, Tooney, Creed, and Trey Smith. They're all good. They play together now for a couple of seasons. They're the best interior offensive line in the NFL. But, Juwan Taylor and Donovan Smith,
yep.
What are they going to look like? And, again, they're probably not going to get a lot of pop. But I will note, a couple of years ago, when the Chiefs had just traded for Orlando and brought him in and turned over that offensive line the year after the Super Bowl, I think Mahomes, if memory serves, played one drive in that game. It was against the Cardinals, I think. And the offensive line stayed in. The first string offensive line, that new offensive line, I think played into the second quarter. And it'll be interesting to see if that's what Andy decides to do here with this inexperienced, newer offensive line. I'd have to go back and look at that box score to make sure that I'm not making that up. But I'm 99% sure that he let the new offensive line, play pretty deep into that first preseason game. And so I'm really interested to see how they look. Obviously, you're not going to get a lot of funky looks from the Saints defense in this game. It's preseason, but I just want to see how they look up there, how they're communicating, and how they're looking. So now, sir, we can turn it over to the defensive side of the ball. And I know you've already got a choice, so let me know who you're thinking.
All right. So Felix Anudike-Uzomah obviously is a guy that, everyone was excited for. Local kid, great story. All you K-State fans that are listening to this have watched him play football a lot and are excited to see him in a Chiefs uniform. I haven't seen much out of it, and neither has anyone else so far in camp. He just hasn't quite. He's low on the rotation. There hasn't really been a lot of footage of him. He's been banged up a little bit, I think, right? Like, didn't he have, I thought he had like an injury issue maybe early on in camp. Maybe I'm making that up now because I just haven't seen
it.
But
yeah, he did.
Okay. So obviously, he's not going to be in there for the first team pass rushers against a first team offensive line for the Saints. It seems very likely that they're going to rotate him in to more of a second team pass rush. And so that gives him an opportunity to maybe, if the cards fall just right, go up against a second string right tackle or something like that and show off a little bit and show that he was a first round pick. And typically first round picks, you expect him to hit the ground running. You expect him to be a contributor. You don't pick project players in the first round. You just don't. And he's a guy that needs to kind of, for his own confidence. I mean, I don't know that he's not feeling confident, but I just think that for the story of Felix Anudike-Uzomah, he needs to come out and at least hit the ground running in the preseason and show that he's a football player. And I'm hoping he does that.
Yeah. It's going to be great. I mean, obviously, when you take a guy in the first round and a guy at a position that the Chiefs have really needed an impact player at for years, really, it's exciting to see what he's going to be able to do. He looked great in some of his one-on-one reps against Donovan Smith, but let's see him out there against a real offensive line. I'm going to go with a non-rookie. I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball here, and I'm going to go with Brian Cook, the second-year safety out of Cincinnati. They have been hyping him up a lot in camp and, in fact, have been reportedly trying to get him to sort of quarterback the defense a little bit, which is interesting to me because not only do you have the linebackers who, very often are sort of seen as the quarterbacks of the defense, but also you have Justin Reed. I mean, Justin Reed is a guy who you signed as a veteran to sort of take over Tyrann Mathieu's role, running the back end of the defense, running the communication through the secondary, and he's a sturdy NFL veteran. He went to Stanford. He's played, 5 or 6 years in the league now. He was a Super Bowl champion, as was Brian Cook last year. But I mean, he was the starter last year. It just is interesting to me that they are trying to get Brian Cook more into that role. And I'm interested to see how much of that role he has on Sunday. I don't know if we're going to see it very often, because again, obviously the starters in this game are not going to get a ton of run. But I'm intrigued by that. It's something that I got my radar on.
Yep, I agree with that. It's he's an interesting, fun story right now. I'm going to go with another second-year player on defense that had an injury-riddled first start to his career and then completely came on and was a dog. Of course, I'm talking about Trent McDuffie. I think that he's a guy that has potential to be a 1A cornerback in the NFL, to be a guy that people talk about among the best of the best in the league. And, he performed really well coming off of that early season shitty Arizona turf injury that he got, and by the time he kind of got his feet back under him when he became healthy again, like, he was a dude. And I just, there's a ton of receiver talent, especially in the AFC with the quarterback talent. Like, he's going to be asked to do a lot on defense, as all cornerbacks in the NFL. It's an awful job. Like, they just are so behind the 8 ball every single play, but I think he's up for it. I think he's up for the challenge. I think his sophomore year is going to be a special one, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm going to go with a free agent acquisition for my second choice, and it's going to be Charles Omenihu, who,
interesting,
for some reason we neglected to mention in the news, is going to serve a 6-game suspension.
Was that only a couple days ago? I thought that was 2 weeks ago.
I don't think we talked about it in last week's show. We are recording this on a Friday, which is a little bit later than normal, but I think it must have dropped the day. I think it was a Friday afternoon news dump after we reported last Thursday.
You're right. It was.
Which is why I forgot to put it into the show notes. So this is an excuse for us to sort of double back on the news that we should have covered at the top of the show. But Charles Omenihu, I am excited to see, because we're not going to see him for a while after this. And
6 games.
Yeah, unless it gets appealed down, and unless I miss it, I don't think we've seen whether this is a final suspension or whether it can be appealed. But I mean, listen, this was obviously a suspension that the Chiefs were expecting on some level, probably depressed his market a little bit, but he's going to be here for a couple years. We've got him under contract for next season as well. And this guy's a dog. I mean, he was a great player for the 49ers last year, albeit in a defense that was ludicrously stacked with talent. It's just going to be interesting, obviously, as the ongoing Chris Jones holdout continues, just to see what he's going to bring to the table and what we're going to be missing with him out in week 1 and through week 6, and hopefully not with Chris Jones out also. But I'm just excited to see him. I'm excited to see how he plays in the defense. I'm excited to see what he looks like without Chris Jones out there. Just the burst and the pass rush that he's able to bring without, Nick Bosa and all the other monsters that the 49ers had around him last year. Just excited to see what he could do. So that's my second pick.
I like it for sure. We allowed offensive line as a group last time, so I'm going to go with the linebackers. I'm going to go with the three-headed monster of Gay, Bolton, and our guy, Leo Chanel, who came on late last year, especially in the Super Bowl, played an amazing Super Bowl.
It's really a four-headed monster. You left Drew Tranquill.
I did leave Drew Tranquill out. That's right. And Drew Tranquill looks like he is going to play a ton and be a huge contributor
like
on the defense. Yes, right, exactly. So those four guys are exciting. I mean, one of the best linebacker cores in the NFL, no question about it. I think they all have a ton of juice, and Nick Bolton was a fingernail away from winning a Super Bowl MVP last February. I mean, he was awesome, and it just having good linebackers, as we know from watching some good Chiefs teams that had some great linebackers, just makes the whole stew work. It just brings the pass rush gets more off, the secondary gets to cover a little bit looser. Like when your linebackers are covering the middle of the field and tackling guys and laying the thunder and doing all the stuff that the linebackers do, it just helps. It's like having an offensive line that's dominant. I know you would think that the defensive line would be the equivalent there, but to me, it's like the glue on the defense is the linebackers. And yeah, they're not as like traditionally valued. You can kind of plug in some guys and do some stuff there. Linebackers are a pretty low analytical position, but when they're dudes, they still stand out quite a bit. And I think the Chiefs have four dudes here. I think they have a group that's really going to go out there this year and assert their dominance. And I'm just very much looking forward to that squad and seeing how they play.
All right, I'm going to pick a position group too, because it's hard.
You got the last pick, buddy.
Yeah, well, I got the last pick, so I can do whatever I want. I'm going to take the cornerbacks. I really am interested to see after Najee Johnson's injury, which sucks. I mean, it just is a huge bummer. I mean, before he got hurt, he was getting a lot of first-team reps, which is not the state of the cornerback room as of the end of last year. He was a seventh-round pick. He was taking reps from some of the other guys in that, Fantastic Four, whatever they were called, Fab Four, Fab Five.
Fab Four, sure.
What were they
Fab
calling,
Five, Fab Five.
Sure,
like the Michigan Fab Five. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he was taking some reps from some of those guys. I'm just interested to see how that shakes out. And again, preseason game one, far more than, these unofficial depth charts that we get, really does tell you, I think, especially for this organization, because I think the Chiefs really do stick to a pretty rigid structure in terms of who they're playing when in the preseason. Like, I think, first string's going to be out there for a drive or two. Then it's going to be the second string guys. Maybe we'll let the first string guys that are newer to the system or rookies play an extra drive or two. But they have a pretty set hierarchy here. And so I think who's playing when with the cornerbacks is going to tell us a lot about how they see that room shaking out. I'm really curious to see kind of how the Chiefs see their cornerback room at this point. So there you go. 3 on offense for each of us, 3 on defense for each of us. It's going to be fun. I'm just excited to see the Chiefs out on an NFL football field playing football again, even if it's not real football. Speaking of not real football, let's take our journey back in time to the year 2003, 20 years ago. Now, we've been doing this series called Ass Blast from the Past, which is a reference to our favorite show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. This week, however, was truly worthy of the name Ass Blast from the Past, because this was an all-time ass blasting in Chiefs history. And I said I wasn't going to spoil who lost this game, but I feel like I got to come out and say it. The Chiefs fall behind 31-0 in this game. They lose to the Minnesota Vikings 45-20. This was an 8-6 Vikings team, and the Chiefs get absolutely blown out. As such, we are not giving out any awards for this game. We're not even going to talk that much about the game itself, but I do want to talk big picture because this game is interesting in a macro sense. And I mean like in a macro sense. Like nothing to do with the game is that interesting or compelling, but there are some things about this game that I do, or not about this game, but the pieces sort of tangentially involved in this game that I do want to talk about. Before we get to that, I do want to ask you, as an avid follower of the 2003 Chiefs, a contemporaneous fan of the 2003 Chiefs that was watching the season, was this game kind of it for you? Like,
it was real close. So
we didn't talk about it.
That's what I was about to bring up. Yeah.
They had just gotten blown out by the Broncos a couple weeks before this. Now this is the second blowout loss in 3 games, and I just kind of walk me through where you're at. It's 9-0 start, and now here we are.
Yeah. So obviously, the defense has been a problem for the last. The Bengals only won 24-19. Defense certainly was okay in that game. They weren't terrible. It was just a hard day to play football. But then, the Broncos put up 45 on in that blowout that we didn't talk about. And then the Vikings put up 45. So that's 2 out of the last 3 weeks that the Chiefs have been non-competitive, and the defense has been a big reason why. And, when you play with fire the way that the 2003 Chiefs defense did, which is relying on big plays and turnovers and defensive touchdowns and kind of stuff that isn't as sticky as just being good at defense and stopping the other team from moving the ball. Like that, if you have a team on defense that just makes it really hard to move the ball on them, the other stuff figures itself out. But if you don't have that, if you have the bend but don't break defense that the Chiefs have been known for throughout their illustrious franchise, including this 2003 season, eventually you do break. Eventually, when you say bend but don't break, like you can only bend so much before you break. And so, yes. So after the 9-0 start, when I even going into that Bengals game was talking about like, man, it's just, when is that other shoe going to drop? When is this team going to lose the pixie dust? Sometimes sports teams don't lose it until the offseason. Sometimes. 2014 Royals didn't lose it in the offseason, but after 2015, they certainly did. There's certain groups of players that when they get together can put together a magical 12, 14, 16-month run or whatever, but it just felt like this team didn't have enough gas to make it to the finish line of this season. I don't know why. And this is not me looking back on it with, pretending like I was right or whatever. I remember these feelings during 2003. I remember just thinking like, it's been fun. I've loved the offense. I've loved it. But at the same time, I've grown up, the 10 years or whatever that I've been watching Chiefs football until that point, watching the Chiefs never be able to get across the finish line anyway, regardless of the pieces that they had on offense or defense or whatever. So, this game was kind of just like, yep, I wondered when this was going to happen. Yep. Like as the Vikings were just putting up point after point, it was just like, see, I knew this was going to be a problem. And so like, that was kind of that mindset for me.
All right. Well, that's all we have to talk about this game. As far as I'm concerned, we don't need to spend any more time talking about this game.
No, it was an ass blast, like you said.
We should talk about the Minnesota Vikings because
yes, please.
This is one of the weirdest franchises in the NFL, and we don't get a chance to talk about them very often because they're an NFC North team. We see them once every few years. This is a team that the Chiefs beat back in Super Bowl IV, 23-7. The first of 4 Super Bowl losses for the Vikings that we were just talking about yesterday. And apropos of nothing, but we decided we wanted to throw it onto the pod because it's wild. We don't talk enough about the Vikings Super Bowl history. It's preposterous. It's absurd.
It is. The Vikings are a very weird, like you said, weird franchise. And if you think 4 Super Bowl losses, the first thing everyone rightfully thinks of is not the Minnesota Vikings. It's the Buffalo Bills because they lost 4 of them in a row while we have all been alive. And so it's just it's what we think of. But these poor Minnesota Vikings, they were absolutely, in case anyone didn't know this, they were a preposterous defense. So to give you an idea of why they were called the Purple People Eaters back in the 70s, they went on a streak where they didn't allow the opponent to score more than 2 touchdowns in any game for 47 consecutive games.
That's like 3 years.
Yes, they did. They went from the opener in 70 to like one of the last games in 72 without allowing 3 touchdowns, which, yeah, you figure, it was the 70s football. The next longest streak in NFL history of not allowing an opponent to go score 3 touchdowns is 17 games. So yes, this Minnesota Vikings defense, the Minnesota Vikings from 70 to 72 had somewhere around like a plus 400 point differential on their opponents. The next best team in the NFL was the Cowboys at plus 200. So they were the only good team from 70 to 72. And yet those poor Vikings lost Super Bowl 4 to the Chiefs, but then also 8, 9, and 11. So they kept getting close, and they kept going up against league MVPs at quarterback, and just they never had a quarterback. Like, we've seen that story play out in Kansas City. Dominant defense, no quarterback. It doesn't work. It's not a good way to win football games. It's a good way to win regular season football games. It's not a good way when the tournament eliminates all the teams except for the good quarterbacks and you're sitting there left without one. You're going to get left out. And so that's the Minnesota Vikings. That's the story that we don't talk about a lot, because since Super Bowl 11, it's been almost 50 years since they've even made it back to a Super Bowl. They haven't made it back. And
crazy.
They're sad and they're weird. Another weird stat I pulled on them the other couple months ago, completely, again, apropos of nothing, but I was looking at like the best, hard way to put this. Like, they had the best record of every franchise's worst 30-game stretch. So of everyone's basement performance, the Vikings' basement performance is the best in the NFL. I forget what the number was. I think it was like 18-12 over 40 games. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But like, no, 12-18 must be. There's no way they were over 500 in their worst stretch. But my point being, the Vikings have never been the worst team in the NFL. Very, 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 very rarely are they like the one that everyone laughs at. But they're also never the best. I mean, despite they've had some cool players. We'll talk about one of them here in a little bit, but like, they're just weird. They're very strange.
Speaking of weird, this 2003 Vikings team started off 6-0. And we were discussing this before the show at the top of the broadcast, and we got to throw this stat in here because it's so wild. So this Vikings team finishes 9-7 and misses the playoffs. So for our listeners listening to this podcast, I'm just going to ask you a question. You can do a little trivia time here for us, and we'll give you the answer. How many teams in NFL history do you think started 6-0 in the Super Bowl era, I should say? Because let's face it,
once the schedules expanded and the playoffs expanded and all that,
How many teams in NFL history do you think started 6-0 and did not make the playoffs? And my guess was fewer than 10, but I thought it would be like close to 10, right? Because there's been a lot of football.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had a guess, but you do have the answer.
I do. Before I say that, just to detail the Vikings 2003 schedule while you all think about it a little bit more. Started off 6-0, dropped 4 straight games, immediately down to 6-4, and then went win-loss, win-loss, win-loss to end the year. So they were literally 6-0, 0-4, 500 in 3 distinct stretches in this season. I mean, that's just so weird. That's really just weird. What is their identity? They're not a 500 team. Bizarre. They're not a 0-4 team, and they're not a 6-0 team. They're just none of it. It's just they're very strange. So to answer your trivia question, there have been 4 teams in the Super Bowl era to start 6-0 and miss the playoffs. The 1968 Los Angeles Rams, the 1978 Washington Redacteds, the 2003 Minnesota Vikings that we're just talking about, and then 6 years later, the 2009 Denver Broncos started off 6-0, and those poor Broncos would then go 2-8 in their final 10 games and miss the playoffs at 8-8.
6-0, and they finished 8-8. real bang up job by a coach who has found himself back in the AFC West.
AFC West.
Josh McDaniels.
Yeah, Josh McDaniels. That's right.
So, bang up job by the Raiders to hire that guy who started off 6-0 and finished 500 in a season. Let's talk about one other notable participant in this game, Randy Moss. Hey, yeah, he's pretty good.
Randy Moss is a dude, man. He scored the first 2 touchdowns of this game. This was arguably the most successful so he had his 2007 season with Tom Brady, which was 1,500 yards, 23 touchdowns, an NFL record. He was great. He was obviously great. But this was his best year as a Minnesota Viking. He had 1,632 yards, which is the most yards he ever recorded in a year, and 17 touchdowns, and was an All-Pro, first-team All-Pro. That was actually only... Games. Exactly. That was actually only his 3rd first-team All-Pro. His rookie year, when he won Rookie of the Year, was incredible and also had 17 touchdowns. He was one of the greatest rookie years of all time.
Yeah, I mean, probably the greatest rookie year of all time.
Probably so. Yes, exactly. He had All-Pro that year. Oh, yeah, in 2000. He was 5th in Offensive Player of the Year, was the All-Pro, and then 2003, and then 2007 with the Patriots. So 4-time first-team All-Pro for Randy Moss, and just one of those guys that, like, when I think about my all-time NFL talents, if I'm filling out a roster of the best player at every position, like, he's my first draft pick at wide receiver. He was everything that you've ever wanted. Now, I always also talk about Calvin Johnson, kind of back and forth with these two guys, because when you have size and speed at the wide receiver position, I mean, clearly that's what you're going for. That's what you want. And boy, I mean, Randy Moss could just run circles around the defense. He was super tall, could jump, had great hands, and his creativity. You know, everyone always remembers the lateral play where he was 10 yards away from the end zone and flips it over his head to, I forget now, the other Vikings receiver that caught that ball. I'm sure someone listening definitely knows that. But so I love Randy Moss. I think he's a great talent. I think he's a hilarious personality. I love the straight cash homie stuff, and like just his Texas drawl. I think it's it's probably Mississippi. I think cracks me up. He's just he's a character, and it's too bad that he had to spend
those tiny Randy Moss DirecTV commercials. You remember those?
Yes, tiny Randy Moss. Good pull there.
That was great.
It's too bad that he had to spend 2 seasons in Oakland and 3 seasons catching passes from Tom Brady. But with all that being said, I know I love the guy, because if he just spent the last 5 years of his life or of his career in those teams, and I don't hate him, clearly that's because I like Randy Moss a lot. However, he played for 3 teams after the 2009 New England Patriots. Can you name the 3 NFL teams without clicking on his Pro Football Reference page and looking at it right now that he played for after the 2009 Patriots?
I'm literally looking at his Pro Football Reference page right now, and I was going to say, so our listeners again can play this trivia game with us and see if they can name them. I didn't remember any of these 3 teams, so there's no chance that I would have guessed any of these 3 teams. And in particular, I would have guessed the Titans, because we recently had a conversation. Yeah, we recently had a conversation when DeAndre Hopkins signed there about how Tennessee is the place that great wide receivers go to play out there. That's where they get put out to pasture.
Andre Johnson
and turn into glue. Andre Johnson, Julio Jones,
Julio, of course,
DeAndre Hopkins, and Randy Moss, all 4 of those guys. So he was traded in 2010 from the Patriots back to the Vikings. He played for 3 teams in 2010.
Yes,
so I'm actually not even certain what order he played them on. Do you have this information pulled up?
I remember it for sure. So the Patriots traded him to the Vikings, and then the Vikings cut it. And then he was picked up by the Titans, played a couple games for the Titans. But then the one that no one remembers is in 2012, the San Francisco 49ers.
He retired.
Yes, he did not play in 2011. Yes, that's correct. And he only in 2012, I mean, it's not like you don't remember him, despite him having a prolific year in San Francisco. He started 2 games, but did play in all 16 games for the 2012 San Francisco 49ers, and caught 28 balls for 434 yards and 3 touchdowns that season.
I mean, he had a better year than he had
the year before that. The year he got traded in 2010.
He played in 3 playoff games for the Vikings, for the 49ers. He caught 7 balls for 112 yards. I mean, that San Francisco team is the one that lost in the Super Bowl to the Ravens,
in
the
the
Harbaugh
in
Bowl.
the Harbaugh
Randy
Bowl. Yep.
Moss played in that game, which is
He
wild.
Did.
That was wiped from my memory, much like the Chiefs' 45-20 loss to the Vikings. Let's close the book on that, and let's end this on a positive note. We've got a mailbag question that I've been hanging on to for a couple of weeks because a lot of stuff has been going on, but we've got time to answer it. Do it justice. It's from our guy, Andrew Whiteside, at OU_SAS. Yeah. Question for the pod, or draftable, whichever. We're just going to do it as a question because, draft, this pod's already run pretty long. So, which Star Wars character would make the best NFL head coach, and why is it Thrawn in a Bill Belichick style hoodie? Alternatively, draft top 10 Star Wars characters as NFL coaches. Now, we're not going to draft, but we do need to set some parameters here. And I think if the parameter involves purely coaching, like they're not allowed to impact the game in any way other than coaching, then it's clearly Thrawn. He's the best tactician that we know of in the Star Wars universe. He would be insane. He would draw up the most ludicrous plays. We would have Thrawn he'd be creating plays that we've never even heard of, that we've never even seen. He'd be an amazing football coach. For those of you who don't know who Grand Admiral Thrawn is, you're going to be very confused right now, but you need to get in on that. He was a character created by Timothy Zahn in the Heir to the Empire trilogy in the early 90s. Formative books in my childhood, which now are classified as legends by Disney Star Wars. They wiped those away. But Thrawn was such a good character that they brought him back and they recanonized him. He appeared in Rebels. He's going to appear in the upcoming Ahsoka series. He's going to be the primary villain there. He does look a little bit like Space Elon Musk. I just have to tell you, as a longtime Thrawn lover, he did not look like Space Elon Musk before. Okay, so that is a little bit unfortunate, but it's clearly Thrawn. But let's sort of riff on other non-Force users, because obviously if we're expanding this, like if we're permitting them to impact the game beyond coaching, then shit gets really wacky.
Yeah, then you've got Yoda just mind controlling the ball, or force controlling it, and the moment it's thrown, he's just going to move it to where it needs to go and all that stuff. So I think that if they're not allowed to use their powers of force persuasion or all that on the game, you still have a lot of wisdom in the Star Wars universe. You still have a lot of people that have been around that can tactically think about situations. And that's a very key element for a lot of these people. The first person I thought was Yoda, and I thought it would be hilarious to hear him on the headset calling in plays to the quarterback in his backwards Yoda talking jet chip wasp it would be, or just very
chip jet wasp
chip jet. And then the quarterbacks would be like having to try and translate it in their heads to what the actual play call. It would just be a lot of fun. I do think if you want to talk non-Force users, Admiral Akbar, he's a tactics and strategy guy. You saw that in Battle of Endor. He certainly would be able to spot a trick play coming from a mile away, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to go with Admiral Akbar would be an excellent NFL coach.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. After Thrawn, and again, assuming that we don't get Force users, because obviously you'd have Palpatine, you'd have Vader, you'd have Yoda out
Obi-Wan.
there, zapping each other. Obi-Wan, sure, and not just force manipulating the ball, but Jedi mind tricking people on the other side. But
the player doesn't want to come out of the game, and next thing you know, they're sitting down. And
you've got Force heal on the injuries. He comes to the sideline. Yoda just lays his hands on him, and he's like, "All right, Pat, your ankle's good. Get back out there." Who would not be susceptible though to the Jedi mind trick because he's not weak-minded and is great at scheming is Jabba the Hutt. I actually think Jabba the Hutt gives me, I don't want to say Andy vibes because that's rude. It's like fat shaming, but he gives me Bill Belichick vibes a little bit, the deep belly laugh. That's sort of how I imagine Bill Belichick laughing. And listen, Jabba the Hutt, he doesn't get a lot of screen time. He obviously gets choked out by Princess Leia on the sail barge, but Jabba the Hutt in the expanded universe is well known to be one of the craftiest. Really, all the Hutts are known to be very crafty and great schemers, which, that's the job of an NFL head coach in a nutshell. And, NFL head coaches, not to cast blame on anybody, but listen, Jabba the Hutt being this big, fat, disgusting slob that is the brains of the operation, that kind of does fit with, a lot of the NFL head coaches. They're out there coaching the beefcakes, and, they're over there, eating live crustaceans from a little jar, on their little dais watching the slave girls dance. So Jabba the Hutt would be he'd be kind of my dark horse, my alternate after Thrawn. Great question. Loved it. Thank you so much, OUSAS. We will be back next week. It's always sunny in Cheese.